Hello, everyone, and welcome to the broadcast. Hope we're all doing well today. We're going to be picking up with our game dev project. Made some progress offline. I've been doing more and more coding on this as we have moved along. Should be good times. See, we've got some folks already here. King and Sam. Well, King was here earlier. I don't know if they are going to if they're still here. But hello, Tatum and Sam. Hello. And Skia. Welcome. Let's check in with kitties real quick. We do have Sky and Mason visible. Let's stick with this camera. It is pretty reliable. And okay, so this is where we've gotten so far. We are able to reliably create a lot of projectiles with a lot of different movement patterns. This one's a bit hypnotic, don't you think? So, what this one is a projectile that is homing around the player, and it moves in a spiral 3 times. So, there is a little bit of nuance to that in that the way it's going is it tries to track the player's motion and apply that. So each individual one that's orbiting is pushing it off further and further from the player. I don't actually mind this. If it was just one orbit, it would be able to track the player just fine. I may still have to come up with something that says, this is where I want you to be, but the track how the player is moving, I feel is a little more reliable. We may refine it later. But if we just have one spiral, like with just one spiral, they pile up like that. And if I take the spiral and I remove, well, here, let's give it a nice big radius to start with. And then we can also move in a spiral. And we'll keep it by default. So spiral on a spiral again. So we can see it's slowly moving left because I am moving left. And it wants to drift back to me. Now, as for like look and feel, the yarn balls and similar, all of these are going to be cat relevant things to start with. As far as other things we may add down the road, there may be some more that aren't, but those would have to appear later in a run. I didn't notice that, how it drifts back to where the player is. That actually makes sense based on the way the code works. Okay, but that is how we've got weaponry up and running. We can actually do that a couple of times and have we could do entity template dot template 2. We don't need... we'll keep it going that way. I think it's color modulate. What's it called? Color modulate. We'll make it a little red. Hey there, Copper. We're doing good. Things have been going relatively well. Yesterday was a bit of a physical strain. So if we offset them just a little bit, or we change their behaviors actually. So both of them have a 360 spread pattern based on this. So if we modulate them just a little bit. But we're able to do things like that at the moment. We can set up different entities, we can set up different templates, different behaviors entirely. So the next thing we need to start doing as far as the testing is concerned is have these spawners be rebuilt on the fly. Such that we could say, hey, if I add this, then it changes the following things. So what that's going to mean is we need a different set of collision zones here. I've got that in the game scene. Air zone, enemy zone, bullet zone. Do you mean like the blue energy in Warframe? Or something else? So we have a series of spawners, but it's not really where they're going to live. And I'm not really sure what you're referring to, so I can't speak to that. It's also been a bit since I've seen the UI of Warframe or anything like that, so they may have changed things. But generally, if I recall, energy is the thing you use up for your powers. Where do we want to put this? We have a bunch of positioners and we have a bunch of movement types. And what I want to do for this test is to make it so that every time you touch one, of them, I wouldn't be able to tell you, Sam. It's been a while. Every time you touch one of these items, we're going to shuffle what you have to change the behavior. Now, we still need to be cautious to have things in a rational order. And one of my thoughts was that a particular projectile always behaves in a particular way by default. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with the template of the projectile as it exists. So the homing mouse will always target a mob and home towards it once we get randomly target mob. I don't know how the yarn ball is going to operate. Yarn ball might operate like your throwing axe kind of thing, where it arcs up into the air and then falls, like off the bottom of the screen. I might keep it as just moving outward in a spiral with more and more projectiles. Who knows? Excuse me. But for the time being, we're going to have that as a default starting point. So let's take this and say this one has the yarn ball image. We're going to say each of them will spawn on the player. They're going to have no default pattern. They're going to target a random direction and move in a straight line. This is not like end state, but it is for testing purposes. And same with the yarn ball. It will target a random direction and move in a straight line. And it spawns on player. So we've got a 3 and a 4 going. Remove that color modulation. We'll say they both spawn at 1. Make sure they're operating. Being in a clan is not necessarily important. Having a clan base unlocks a lot of features. Okay, so they're functioning. It's weird. We'll give them all a 5-second lifespan just to keep it contained. Which should mean they get about 5 squares away. All of them should live about this far. Yep. And we'll put it at a nice solid 10. Means they should get to about the edge of the screen. Excuse me. Okay, so now we need the idea of a pickup item. It's a regular old entity, but it has its own collision zone. They're still entities. Their default movement pattern will be that they spawn randomly on screen. That's all they do. For the time being, we're just going to have them spawn pretty regularly so I can pick them up. The trick with this is going to be that each one of them... Oops, that's not how we do that. Initiate a child scene, which is a collision zone, like that. So then each collision zone right now in the code for a collision zone, when we have a collision, we just set them up to go away. This is if they're too far away from the player. This whole chunk of logic needs to be updated. So, for example, if we have an XP drop, like the in Vampire Survivors, they're little crystals. They vary in what they are in different games, but the items that you need to pick up in order to level up. If those get too far away from the player, we actually want to respawn them near the player as a condensed one. So, 100 points are off the screen, smoosh them into a 100-point gem, and respawn them. So, condense. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be a linear thing. It could be an exchange rate kind of stuff. But that area would have its own logic. It might be convenient as a result to have child classes of collision zones. That the player zone reports it only to the player object. The enemy zone reports it to whatever enemy it collided with. That might make the player zone and the enemy zone equivalent. But alternately, I have no idea, Sam. Bullet zone, enemy zone, and player zone all behave very similarly. Hello, Joji. Welcome. Stretch. Oof. Good opportunity to stretch, actually. You sit at a keyboard a lot, or even use a controller a lot. It's a good idea to learn some kind of arm stretches. There are a particular variety of them that are good for things like the wrist up through the elbow. Because you don't, especially with the wrist, you don't want too much muscle weakness, because you can get it's not like a sickness or anything like that. It's a condition of your muscles and tendons where nerves in your wrist can get slid into a bad position based on how you constantly hold your wrist and whatnot. And then they can grind along things or slide into positions to get pinched. And that sensation, that pinch, can spread all the way up to your shoulders, and it can get excruciating. That's carpal tunnel. There are surgical procedures to alleviate it now, but you don't want to get cut open if you can avoid it. Anyhow, so what we don't want is to just automatically remove things if they're too far from the player, if they're not a projectile or an enemy. So what I might do is follow the same pattern that we have in a couple of other places, is that there are internal overrides that child variants will use. Not really within my capabilities. Big chunky stabilizer boots prevent it. So don't draw them if they're out of range. I think it's still viable. On collision needs to be handled by the specific area. In theory, but I think we could actually just inform both that they have been collided with. Hello, random guy. And also, hello, Atomic, over there on Twitch. So we have our local on collision. I think this is a fail-safe to make sure we're not grabbing something that is long since gone. I think we should always have an entity say, I have been struck in this frame, or I've been touched in this frame. Don't react again. So until a whole physics tick has come back around, it doesn't refresh its collidable state. We could always extend that, to have iframes. But for the time being, it would be like I subframe. Just so we don't multi-collide on a given object. As soon as the first collision happens between two objects, both of them have collided and they don't collide anymore. So in this, we need to report that a collision happened to the corresponding objects. Then I think the player needs to track their spawners instead of having I think the player should be the location where the spawners get attached. Because then also when we remove the player, it can cascade down through the spawners. Perhaps you should address the individual in particular and they could answer. We're not already going to delete them, then we add the deletion to it. So each entity in the list needs an event that it raises, that it passes in itself. I think a name Gavin sounds familiar. I mean, outside of, Newell, but, in the stream, but I don't know otherwise. So this is where we get the particular entity of the collision. And then we're going to report to it. This is where we would report to it that a collision happened. It's unclear what you're attempting to convey there, Gavin. Your question has been addressed. Do. Easy enough to deal with. Forgot the sequence that you do that in. Done and done. Okay, so entities need a way to collide by default. So they're initialized. Let's just collapse some of these functions here. Don't need to create the movement chain. That's not what we're worried about. It's movement-based, movement-based, movement-based. So this is when we finally get rid of the entity. That's not what we're doing in this case. There are elements to the removal interface that prevent it from being reliable. Okay, so when we're handling a collision, we need a colliding entity. And then we'll do something. We also need a signal where it says, "Hello, crazy. Welcome." If you are in tall format, sometimes it doesn't do what it's supposed to. Do a quick check here. Okay, the URL is correct. If you can get the URL and load that up, the URL is correct, but it may be that tall format is preventing it. Hello, Demon. Welcome. Okay, so when an entity has a collision event that it wants to, or when the entity wants to be removed for some reason, it will raise this signal. Which will remove the deletion protocol from the collision zone itself. And instead, when a collision zone gets this message, it will add it to the entities to delete collection. If it can find it, or I'm sorry, if it's not already in there. because it verified that the entity currently existed in its collection accordingly before it reported the collision. But how to do... For those just joining us, we're working on getting the collision logic more to actual end state. Right now, we've just got generic collision that says if two things collide, get rid of them. Except in the case of the player. Having one-way collisions will help. In that we can say, this collided with you, and then that entity can say, do this thing. Because the player doesn't really need to interact with things when it collides with them. There might be circumstances where that's going to end up being true, but I feel like those would be special cases that we're not addressing at this time. Hello, Ember. Ember. She says, no, Sammy's sitting on your lap already. Because we could have a child object that we could also inform of a collision. Things like, this thing has health kind of stuff. But I think that's still pretty generic as far as entities are concerned. We could still have extended objects, because pretty much all of this is uniform. But what it would mean in order to get this working is to make it so that entities had a type as well. Right now they don't. So, for example, the player is an entity type, a monster is an entity type, a item is an entity type, a projectile is an entity type. I could use collision zones to identify them, but I don't think that's ultimately going to be how it'll work. I think it would be better to have it report what kind of thing it is, so that we can at least keep track of that as far as collision handling. Because each individual entity is not going to handle its collisions by itself or uniquely. The yarn ball doesn't have a unique collision. It has patterns of behavior that we will get to. For the time being, we're going to have the entity just raise remove me. It's raise. Signal. That's... Oh. That's weird. Look that up for a moment here. Make sure I'm doing this right. Do. Signals. It's how we connect to one. How do I create one? Signal. Emit. Okay. That's what we're looking for. And we're back to it. Yep. We're back to it. Ow. Exist. Hello, Turnip. Welcome. We are getting our collision detection updated to move it out of a universal handler here, since we're kind of past that point. And user signal. Huh. Oh, no, we're already doing that. So we emit signal. Just so. So when it's told to handle a collision, it just says, okay, remove it. So then we go into our collision zone. And now we need to... Whenever an entity is created or is added to the zone, we need... we need to register an event. So here, we add an entity to this area. So then we are going to be on entity I see that you're there, Sandy. Okay, so we add the entity, and that entity This is us connecting our own signal. So if we connect figuring out how to do this. Okay, we're going to tell the entity to connect its signal to our function. And then I think we should be set there, but what we can also do is disconnect. Okay, so we're going to do in the collision zone. If not is connected, entity dot is connected to callable I thought we could just pass the function reference into this, but we might not be able to. There are many kinds of fish in Warframe, Sam. There are also robot fish in Warframe. Where else did we do this? There's a place where we did this connection. Is it in game? You don't. No, we didn't do that there. It's not in movement. It's already connected to this. Then you will be disappointed. We could pair this. Yeah. So you have an on collision right now. I'm going to do this here. Making the game is moving along. Right now we're updating the collision handling so that we're moving it into the entity object instead. And we've lost track of kitty cats. Sammy looking up at the camera for a moment there. So we're setting up some methods here. Can we actually... Okay, we might need... Yeah. That on... Turns a callable... So then in entity, up by the signal, I do static constraining. So then in the collision zone, we can do this, this. Let's say entity dot remove. Need to remove the reload the project for this. Let's try it. Yeah. Then we call connect with this. So if we get this signal and the entity isn't already in the collection, then we'll add it to the removal list. Entity dot handle collision. Ooh. We don't know what the remote entity is. Oh dear. Okay, we have a remote area, which we know is a collision zone. Well, we can try if it's a collision zone. If it's a collision zone, we can say, give me this entity. Know the area as an area 2D. And then the area shape index. Int. I think this will still work if we do it this way. I'm just going to go in and specify them to force it. Go into our game. Instead of 2 projectiles, we'll add in the blob. We need to make sure that the collisions are still working. Need to make sure that we have actually updated the blob. Yeah. Move to player. Spawn on the spawner path. Hello, assorted cheeses. Not spawning blobs. Why are we not spawning blobs? Oh. Sure, they're in the enemy zone as well. Okay, we're still only spawning mice. So there's something wrong with this pattern. Let's make sure that we haven't broken one of the spawn types. Okay, let's look at spawn on player. And then spawn on spawner path. Let's close everything here for a moment. Okay, so on player is one that we've been experimenting with. It needs a done adjusting. I think we might need to make this the default. What is the default on a positioner? By default, it is returning true. Might be good to make a spawn on child, but for the time being, we'll do this. Then spawn randomly on screen. Hey there, aviation. Okay, blobs are spawning. So now we can go back into game and we can everything spawn pretty quickly. Run over here. We're going to get a collision to happen. Okay, blobs are popping still. Okay, so now we go into our collision zones. And we're at about the hour mark, so we're going to take a quick break. For those that are watching and haven't already, if you like what you're seeing so far, consider liking, commenting, and subscribing. It'll help you see more stuff like this in the future. With that said, though, be right back. And we're back. Hello, everyone. Hello. Okay, we need in collision zone. We need a method for returning the entity that we have received. So what we're currently doing is we're using our area RID in order to get the shape index. We could convert this over, this portion of it where we get an entity, pretty much this chunk of logic here, to set the entity to return. So this is, we get a local collision. We could say pass self in and use I'm going to say RID as an RID, because we know our own RID when this happens. For those just joining us that aren't familiar, we are currently developing a Vampire Survivor style game. What we're doing right now is updating the way that we can make things bump into each other, at least as far as them reporting that it happened. We would call it on the area. So we would actually just do this. And we're going to go in and get all of this stuff. Let's see, pass here. Equal to null. Now we need to cast the collision zones, because what I don't want is accidental collisions on a zone that isn't a collision zone here. This is only relevant if it's a collision zone. So we get our local entity is equal to get entity. Which uses local shape index. We're also going to need the local shape RID. Yeah. So we're going to change local shape RID. Because we're asking it which shape RID to use, and we're going to get that here, though. We're getting the local shape RID here. We don't need to pass that in. We're just telling it it's your third shape that we collided with. So then we say entity, our entity, then remote entity, first we need to determine that the remote area is a collision zone. This could lead to problems, but for now we're just going to force it. To area as collision zone. This is prior knowledge. That's technically dangerous. As in, this is assumed prior knowledge. We are assuming that this will be true. It might not be true. Hello, Fanman. If our entity and remote entity, then do a thing. This is if other collision zone, then do a thing. So then we'll say our entity dot handle a collision with remote entity. Remote entity. Testing. We're doing some game development, Fanman. We're making a Vampire Survivors style game. Right now, what we're doing is setting up. We had some basic placeholder collision detection logic, and now we are moving that into the objects that are being collided with. Does it explode? Doesn't. Excellent. So then here, we delete them, and then we're going to say disconnect. Move signal name dot get the callable. As soon as an entity says that it is to be removed, we stop handling collisions with it. We won't remove it twice. And we're going to test that by adding a lot of projectiles at once. Hello, Lucas. Interesting, we're not spawning many blobs at once. Because we didn't augment the number of blobs that we were spawning. Just so. And I messed up that. We've had the yarn ball animation going for a bit. And we need more blobs. Way more blobs. PS plummeting. Oh. Let's remove that part of the pattern, and we're going to say 0.05. We'll make this even easier to test here. Do a 360-degree spread. More blobs. Okay, collision handling is now functional, where each of them is handling their own collisions. Okay, so then in an entity, colliding. Ooh. Not colliding. Then colliding is true and emit the signal. Every time we move, colliding is false. In theory, we could put it in draw. This is a full frame, but... what this should mean is that for a full physics tick, a creature will not collide. So if within a given physics tick, it's colliding, it won't double collide. So if we make it so that the reason that I can spawn way more projectiles, oof, we shouldn't spawn that many though. Oh, that's still too many on screen. That's what we want to do, is we'll spawn fewer of them and faster. The practical limit of entities is about 2,500. At about 2,000, we start to slow down. The core is that we want to spawn them faster right now. We don't necessarily need the more of them. It's got kind of a fountain look to it, doesn't it? Okay. We're going to reduce the number further. We'll just remove the spread. And we can spawn them super fast this way. 100 a second is what we're spawning. Yeah, they need to be slightly slower spawning than the blobs. Was updating the wrong spawn rate, I think. So there are fewer mice spawning than blobs. The blobs should still eventually reach the player, but what I want to see is that the player is very steadily, almost steadily has a safe spot around them here. Yeah, we can still see the mice flicker and spawn. So what if we make... Oh, I don't have a speed multiplier set up. Blobs move faster. Okay, now we can go into the mouse. What we're testing here is I want to make sure that I'm not getting multi-collisions. We're going to do... we want to get multiple at once. So we're going to do 10 in a starburst. But what that will mean is we spawn them slower. So the blobs are moving very swiftly and are very steadily punching in. So the blobs should be on kind of equal ground with them. Then what we need to do is make this slightly slower. They are being steadily removed. But I can't tell how many are being removed, you know? Not much at the moment, dog. 1 and 1. Actually, 1 and 10. This should create a relative equilibrium. No, we're still getting a multi-collision. Right there. See how that one blob is disappearing and no mice appeared? That's a multiple collision there. We need a return value to a collision. We need a way to determine that the entity that I collided with cares. Or that it counted as a collision. So in the entity, on handle collision, entity and not colliding, colliding entity and not colliding entity dot colliding. If they're not already colliding, we're not already colliding, and they exist. This is a bit of a race condition here. Yeah, still a race condition. Because only one mouse should be colliding with that blob. And it's not going to be removed until later. But we don't know when that signal is going to be handled. It could accumulate additional collisions subsequently. Just temporarily. Once it's collided, it won't remove its collision state. Same thing still. What if we don't even tell it about the collision? second if check here. If our entity remote entity double check, that is called colliding. What we're working on right now is we don't want multiple entities to collide with the same entity in a period that it's been collided with. So this is still not working. I'm going to assume Marome, but there's letters in there that I don't recognize, so forgive me. But this is just some piano music that I have access to. It's nice and relaxing. So how can we make it so that they're not being collided with? We're handling all these collisions at once. Everything is being processed in one big batch. And we don't know what the order is. We've already removed them. They're not alive. But we don't want to get rid of all of this stuff yet, because there are multiple collisions that could be happening, and it will throw off the indices if we do. The disabling of collisions should be here. Because it should stop on this moment here. So we have to have a colliding entity. We must not be colliding, and they must not be colliding. If all of those are true, then we set that we're colliding, which should disable this. And then it should emit the signal. So let's give it a test. Well, first, let's find a kitty cat, since Ember has come over to sit with me. There's Sammy. Let's watch Sammy. This is GD script. All right, we have a colliding entity. We don't really care about that collision. Here we go. One collision. Our colliding value is... We are not colliding. Our local, our colliding entity, its colliding value is, it is also not colliding. So we can step in, we set our colliding equals to true. Colliding entity. Multiple mice are colliding is the thing. Right there, we're just getting one collision. We're getting an immediate collision and none of the others handle it. Why is there only one collision happening? Because within the frame, during the physics tick. Well, thanks for joining us, Morome. During the physics tick, we created a whole bunch of them at once. All of them are colliding at once. We are going to put some debugging in here. If colliding entity and colliding entity not colliding. Wait, how are we going to track this? We know that extra things are being deleted. Oh, wait. Let's check. Player zone is not on the player layer. Now we're only getting... We're not getting the blobs removed now. So we're seeing a flicker of 10 there, but they're all going away. All right, we're going to switch it back down to this, if not colliding. If we're not colliding. Let's slow the blobs down again. We're going to make the blobs slightly slower than the player. We need to be able to disengage those packs of them. Let's spawn a whole lot more blobs at once for this test. We want many, many blobs. So the whole reason we're doing all of this collision checking is so that we can get the item pickups in. We want the concept of an item that you touch, or an entity that you touch, and then it grants the player something. Blobs aren't doing their avoidance logic here. Hello, William. Hello, William. Why are the blobs not doing avoidance? There's a whole bunch of stuff going wrong here. They should not be able to overlap like that. What's going wrong? Enemy zone lives on the enemy layer. Think on this a moment here. Ponder, 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 ponder. Hello, Zephyrus. Welcome, everyone. Suddenly, some of our entities aren't working right. The navigation logic has broken down. which is not good. We had everything working. Yeah, they should not be able to stack like that. What's going wrong? Because in the entity, when it actually moves, it just does this. Target movement. It does not move until on agent safe velocity. Yeah. So why aren't they getting their avoidance layer properly set? Or why aren't they obeying their avoidance layer? The blobs should not be overlapping with each other. Maybe the template has a missing piece? Have the avoidance mask. Always passing in. Yeah. We could pass in its actual shape type. But we're assuming rectangles right now. Okay, that's the player object. Hello, Taman. Okay, so this one should be a blob. I only speak English. Right here. It lost all of this. How did it lose its navigation collision? Which means it's got to be in the entity pool that's breaking down. We're never applying the template copy stuff over it. It's going well, Bozy. I found a flaw in some of the entity handling here. Because we're supplying a template to spawn it. No, we're not supplying a template. That's our problem. How do we... Okay, no, we're supplying an entity object. Okay. So we get one. Oh, let's look at our spawner. Something is not right. Hello, William. So we create an entity and we initialize it with the template. Entity is an object. Template to use, here's the player. It has none of that information there. Why does it have none of that information? We have something that's been working by coincidence here. All right. Gonna think on this in a little bit. Gotta step away for a break. Just a moment, folks. And we're back. What about if we go into here? We're going to load the blob template. We should be able to see what the base template is. It does not have any navigation collision set. How is that possible? Did I break something elsewhere? Because this has that data set. How very strange. So entities are, these are template or resources. Resources are a special kind of object. Effectively, they can be loaded, but some of the values are no longer loading here. We did that in order to try to force it to update this information because those types might have changed. Oh, they're still merging. So they're still an object. I can instantiate them, but at the time that they are loaded, like I can load them from file. That they exist, they have properties, that kind of thing. And they're still an object in code. But when I load it, I should be getting a known commodity. It's weird that this just began happening. So I don't know what's changed that's making the blobs collide with each other, because all their navigation information is missing. This stuff right here. We get an int. And the composite of that is the layering. That's... We should be getting that. Like, in the template, I can set that. We are eventually going to store this stuff off, but for the moment, we are loading it directly. Well, hello, Luna. And sorry, I don't think I greeted you properly. Hello, and welcome. Beverage. Wait a minute. Let's try something here. No, that's a seed. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. We don't have an instantiate. It's so strange. So that is an integer. And it should map properly. But it's the fact that this isn't even being loaded. Like, these values aren't coming through at all. Those are loaded. Okay, wait, no. Now they are. Like, there's a... navigation collision layer and navigation avoidance layer. is an entity thing. But there isn't a navigation collision layer and navigation avoidance layer variable on an entity. Oh, because this is an entity template. Yes. So those are set. Those are being set. And it's 4. If it's 4, it's enemy and enemy. This is the blob. Yeah, we're loading the blob resource. Then we duplicate it. Look at entity template 2. That's properly set. We create a spawner for it. And we append that spawner. So we look at our entity template to use. It has collision layers set. So we're going to go in to initialize it. I wonder if this is our problem here. 4 and 4. Now we're going to look at our collision layer and our avoid mask. Those are 4. This is correct. Go down to our navigation server. And we're going to set those 3 things. Yes, we have been doing much. We have spawning patterns, locations. We have extra types of movement. What we're working on right now is a bug. Something has gone wrong in the navigation server. Because the blobs are overlapping each other. We had this working before. That speed multiplier. Here. We can see it a little clearer if they move slower. You could see it momentarily ago, moments ago there. So yeah, they're all piling up. That's a problem. It is very weird, Bose. I don't know what we've changed. To make them do that. Because when we are initializing, this is actually, like, avoidance is enabled. We are calling into safe velocity. Visually, like, I want the blobs not to overlap with each other. So, like, it will look like they're bumping into each other and not moving through each other. By their actual nature, they don't, like, code-wise collide with each other, but navigation-wise, they avoid each other. We could set the names for the layers, but we don't need to, since we're not using those objects directly. We initialize the object when we're moving. We call the movement logic. We're never changing the entity's position. They get more priority the closer they get, but let's real quickly... We're removing the priority change. That shouldn't matter. Yeah. Priority only takes effect if navigation is happening. Not obstacles. We have no regions. It's like suddenly navigation server is not functioning. Yes, Bose, the blobs currently are set up so they always move towards the player. Previously, before this broke, what would happen is that one of them could overlap the player, and all of the others would kind of form a grid almost. Pretty much a grid around that. Because they can't stand right on top of each other. Because the enemy zone reports collisions, but it doesn't actually care. Like, the collision zone for enemy zone and similar isn't relevant to this, because it is the entity itself that is where the collisions happen. I'm sorry, the navigation happens. So we can keep that in there. So like when we call move, movement doesn't actually happen. It's we determine where we want to move, how we want to move, and then we tell the navigation server, this is how we want to move. We have this priority, this is as fast as we can move at this moment, and this is how we are attempting to move. So, you know, which things can I bump out of the way of myself? How fast can I move given the navigation? It's possible that they might have to slow down or change direction. We limit that speed. And then this is how we're attempting to move. It's essentially a direction, a speed, and a prioritization. So then we move, and then at some point after, it calls this and says, this is the safe movement. This is how you can move while avoiding things. So if we do this, this is the player, so So if we look at self, self is a blob. Its safe velocity is 21123, that kind of thing. Let's let a bunch of them converge. I can't really do that because this is happening constantly. Up to 8 times a second per entity, we're getting a safe velocity. We have an agent now. Is it right there? And our collision layer should be set at this point. This is the player. Now we look at it, this is a blob. It should be 4 and 4 for collision and navigation. Yeah, 4 and 4. It's like the navigation server is not doing its thing. One moment. Let's see here. How about... Let's do a quick test. So they're currently spawning on the spawn track. Let's spawn them... Spawn on the screen. I wanted to quickly test a... Was it that they were off screen, essentially? It is not. It up. We tell the navigation server each time where they are. Like when they're initially spawned, we say they are exactly here. It's not movement, we're setting where they are. Each physics tick, we tell them to move. Is there something we removed? We not properly initializing them? Just quick test here. Okay, we're no longer pooling them. That shouldn't matter. Okay, doesn't matter. Go into the spawner. We spawn them, we initialize them. This is when they get their physics. We set them to their actual position now. This shouldn't need to happen because they got their position already during their spawn. There is no dying yet, Fanman. The very concept doesn't actually exist at this point. Okay, what if... we are going to go in... no, Isaac. So avoidance layer, avoidance mask, avoidance enabled, and a callback. Okay. That is happening. It's not like we've updated Godot. We are making a game, Isaac. In particular, entity navigation has broken down. The monsters are not supposed to stand on top of each other. But they are. And that's not supposed to happen. Sub something in movement. Oh, it's just the target movement is getting updated. And entities are the one that determine that anyway when they get a physics tick. Well, they should. Probably going to end up changing that to be physics tick on an entity. Okay, so it's the collision zone that determines whether they should move or not. Right? No. It's drawing. It's our actual physics tick. Okay, we call entity move. We can also move lifespan into entities now. But that's irrelevant. It's a Vampire Survivor style game, a bullet heaven, where the goal is ultimately to have the player spraying weaponry everywhere in order to kill off lots of monsters that swarm in. Usually it is a last until a particular moment or a last as long as you can kind of game. It's like the navigation stuff isn't happening. Blobs avoid everything. Okay, they are not avoiding everything. They are on every layer and they avoid everything. Oops. Oh, thank you. Okay, navigation just isn't happening. Like, the actual avoidance logic is not triggering. Because we know the navigation server is what is making them move. Like, that script is triggering. So, what are we missing? It's not pathfinding that we want. Not that. Call entity move. Entity's move resets its colliding logic. We call move. We get all of the information for movement. We do not change anything about the actual position. We call in and we say, what's the priority, what's the speed, what's the velocity. Let's initialize, we tell it all of this stuff. Temporarily say, make sure that you're actually doing that. The best way to start making games or programming in general, really doing anything, building any skill, is to start doing it. There are lots of tutorials online and a whole lot of the major game development tools. Many of them are free. So if you want to dive way into the deep end, you could use Unreal Engine. If you want something a little more attainable, I would say Unity can be a little easier up front. There are a couple that are easier up front, but Godot is pretty straightforward too. And there are lots and lots of YouTube videos. Let's get rid of that weapon spawner here. And we're going to spawn them really fast so we can verify the behavior. Faster than that. And they must move faster. I would suggest something like Unity or Godot. There are a couple of other ones out there. I mean, look them up. Get an idea of which ones are going to be a little more straightforward for you. But Godot and Unity, I think, would be, as far as like the big ones, would be a way to go. But there are a lot out there. Hey, still not colliding. Hello there, James. It's not that. What if we do the entire block here again? Set the radius, set the map, and we'll do this. Okay, this is completely start over. Except for this, we don't keep that. We don't want to keep remaking that. Okay, we're not moving. To move this down here. Keep that. I think just it fundamentally changed. It's a mystery. Total mystery. That's not where they're moving. This is where they're moving. Function. Set the position of the agent. We set it during initialization. Initialization, safe velocity, and if something calls set position on it. Nothing's calling set position there. one. That one. Just one moment, folks. That one. This one. That one. Okay, I think that's all of them. Yeah. Is dealing with some bots. Some people think they're clever. That's the goal, James. That's the goal. We've got a lot of the pieces for that in place. I think. We've got some mechanical difficulties going on here. Hello, the frog. Okay. We have the target zone to use, and we have a map ID. Maybe that's part of our problem, is we don't have a map ID. I mean, we should. But let's cover our bases here. We have a map RID. Okay, be right back real quickly here. Okay. We start them at 0, and then we move them elsewhere. Is there a different call we need to set? So we get all of their movement here. We call an initial one. They need to have a starting position to do some of their movement. This is tricky. Let's do something here. So what we'll do is we look at set position. Move the transform. Now we move agent. We have agent set position, but there was another pattern to that. What's your problem, Lisa? Got the avoidance call, we've got max speed, we've got all the goodness. It's set velocity forced, but that's not what we really want. Position is what we're dealing with. How did it break down? So we set their initial position. Then go into the spawner. We initialize them, which should show us where they want to be initially. Then we set the position again. And we're doing this for multiple entities, so it doesn't really matter. Because we're calling in with a position to use, which is determined in advance, right? Yeah, because the spawner has a positioner chain. We are always asking it if it's ready to spawn. We get a spawn position and it will default to 0 if it needs to. And we get the spawn position here. It's like they're not seeing each other is the problem. Wait. Should be under collision. It's monitoring and it's monitorable. By default, they have no collision zone, and then we go into our game scene, check each one of these. Player zone lives on player. Let's keep that there. looks for that. Enemies don't collide with bullets. Players don't collide with anything. Then in each entity, we need to make sure that this is set properly. There is on the collision layer. Enemies are on the enemy layer. Bullet layer, and these are the bullet. That largely doesn't matter. This was a big part of what we had to do. Added to the enemy zone. We have a target zone, which is the collision zone. When we spawn something, we have the target zone's map RID. We need entity size in the initialize. Oh, that's to give it an identifier. Okay. Let's see here. It's not during the release process because none of them are colliding properly. It's gotta be somewhere in this movement. Rid of these searches so that we can clean it up. I'm going to say that the blobs try to avoid the player as well. And we're only going to spawn one blob every so often here, just to keep it minimized. 10 seconds. Then blobs move very fast. And Enemy zone does not collide with players. For those joining, our navigation logic has completely broken down. The blob should not overlap with the player like that. There's got to be something that got blown out. Memory or initialization or GUI. I don't even remember when this would have broken. It's got to be something during the movement chain is breaking stuff down. Because the spawner and the movement chain has been what I've been working on most recently. And we're not really taking suggestions on game function or gameplay. We've already got a lot of that laid out, and we're in the very mechanical stage of it. I was actually hoping we were past some of that point. But this breakdown in navigation is very frustrating. It's something that we had working. Like, a lot of effort went into getting that working, and it has mysteriously stopped working. It's got to be in the movement chain. Okay. So when an entity moves, we're going to override that to be sure. It's our initialize. It's our safe velocity. So right here, movement chain move. We're going to leave that, and then we're going to add a little override in here. Equal to player factory, not direction to player. Of position times constants square width. Just double check this. Not normalized. Okay, we hard override it. Don't actually ever use that, do we? Yeah, we do. Up the speed of entity spawning. 1 second. And the blobs do not. Enemy zone does not see players. Okay, it's not potentially not the movement chain then. That's good. Just as a boolean is equal to false. Test is equal to true. If not, test. False. Okay, it's not that we're iterating over movement rapidly. That's good. I knew when this was happening, like when this broke, what I'd be able to do is look back at our branches and see when it happened. Constants entity type. Not really what it is. All right, I'm going to have to look at this a little bit more, folks. So we're going to wrap up here before we just sit here in silence and frustration. Oh, dear. So I wanted to make some progress on items. That's what we were starting to poke at the beginning of this, was getting it so that collision could be handled by the objects themselves, so that I could start adding like little collision plugins. Things like, hey, if you bump into this, inflict harm on the target. If you bump into this, grant an item to the target, kind of stuff. Give the target XP. Those kind of collisions. But as we have discovered, some element of it that I don't want to let go of is not working. So we need to get that back in place. Hopefully I can get some of that done offline before our next stream on Friday. So again, thanks everybody for coming to watch us today. I hope you did have a good time. If you did and you haven't already, consider liking, commenting, subscribing, that kind of thing. It will help you find more content that you might like in the future. So again, have a good rest of your day, everyone. Goodbye.